We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Wednesday, midway through the week. It's a big day today. This will be the first Trump testimony in the Letitia James civil suit in New York. Kicking things off, opening up the show, if you will, Don Jr. This is going to be interesting. This is really going to be intriguing because we're still wondering what he's going to do. Is he going to plead the fifth? Well, that might be the safest thing for him to do so he doesn't get in trouble with his daddy. But the problem is by pleading the fifth, it basically tanks the case because it's different than if it were a criminal case. If someone pleads the fifth, the jury or the judge can assume the worst. When in a criminal trial, you have to disregard it. So it's not going to help Donald Trump out. And they've already done some depositions. So I don't know that they're going to plead the fifth. But Donnie Jr., to start things off, is a good opening act. Like I said yesterday, I hope he's laying off the booger sugar, if you will, because he doesn't do well when he's a little high. We've seen him on Instagram, and he has trouble pronouncing words and putting together sentences, which would put him right in line with his dad, but he's quite a bit younger, so you would hope that he could be communicative, especially when he's testifying against his dad. He has to be careful too. He's in a tight spot. Not only could he throw his dad under the bus, but he's one of the defendants in this lawsuit. So this is going to impact him too. When they take Donnie's stuff away, they're going to take shit away from Don Jr. and Eric and Weisselberg. It's going to affect all of them. And we know the case is already lost. We're just kind of waiting to find out how much it's going to be. So that starts today. Tomorrow is Eric. It was supposed to be Ivanka on Friday, but she's got it pushed out a little bit. Monday, it's Donald Trump Sr. That should be entertaining. And then on the 8th, next Wednesday, a week from today, Ivanka will be testifying. This is a bad moment in time for the Trump family. It's bad enough this case is going, but they've always done whatever they could to avoid testifying. Now they can no longer do that. And here's the interesting thing. I don't know if they'll bring them up twice or not, but as much as the prosecution or the state wants them to testify, I believe the defense is going to have them testify too, which is well and good because the defense team will give them softballs, but then there's cross-examination. So Don Jr. and Eric and Ivanka could get their ass kicked twice. I don't know how that works out exactly, but we'll keep a close eye on it and, of course, keep you posted on what's happening. Well, we have a number of emails, and the first one comes from Old Soul. She was on not yesterday, but the day before. She says, "Hey, Boomer, I feel humbled by the emails and comments from the Sunday podcast. I'd like to thank you and the Boomer community. I try to respond to all comments, but in case I missed any, thank you. Not just for myself, but those gracious enough to allow me to share their stories on the podcast. I do share the videos with women and families I've been able to host in my home. Even though they don't comment, they do read them. Kind words go a long way when you're isolated inside of a judgmental echo chamber, unable to speak your truth. Even though it's my voice, these are their stories, and by allowing me to speak, they feel heard. Once again, thank you, Boomer community, and Boomer, thanks for what you do, Old Soul." And thank you, Old Soul. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. And as I've said, we need to get you on here more frequently. We get a lot of people asking about you. Obviously, the people in the audience love you. I love you. And we'd like to have you on the show more often. I know you do a lot of things. You work and you do a lot of volunteering and you help out a lot of people. So I understand your time is limited. But whatever time you can make available, we'll take it. So thank you, Old Soul, for joining us on the program. And we look forward to the next time you jump on the Rational Boomer podcast. And you know what? One of the reasons I love having Old Soul on, when you're dealing with the things we're dealing with in this community, you have to decide what you're going to do to fight back. And there are only so many things that you can do. But I will tell you this, the voice, the opinions, speaking your mind, that has a lot of power. And her speaking up and speaking her truth has a lot of power. I'm trying to give as many people as I can to have power here so that we can actually make some changes. That may be all we've got, but let's make the most of it. All right, the next one comes from Catherine. She's following up something she sent yesterday, I believe. She said, "Hi, this is a follow-up to your reading my note about gerrymandering from the Sisters podcast. On their latest show at 42 to 52 minutes, the final words were, 'There you go, end of democracy.' I don't know what they gained by saying that. I mean, that's such a fatalistic attitude. I can't believe that they believe that. I just don't think they do. I've seen these women on TV, and they're very bright women, and they know what's going on. I hope it's not just a ploy to get people sucked in and listening to the podcast. I mean, in terms of doing a podcast, my opinion is you just do what you do and you see what happens. Some people listen, some people don't. I don't want to trick anybody or suck anybody in or give a sales pitch that causes people to be concerned or worried, so they have to tune in. I want people to tune in for two reasons: because they want to, because they get something out of it, and because they think it's doing some good. That's the third thing. I don't know. I haven't listened to this podcast. I do have a lot of respect for the women that do the podcast. I just don't think there's any value in this gloom and doom and fatalistic bullshit. That's no way to live, and that's no way to do a podcast as far as I'm concerned. All right, the next one. Hey, Mike, your buddy Jace from Texas. Looks like we finally got a trial date after 12 years of our corrupt as fuck Attorney General Paxton. If anyone thinks he's going to slide like he did in our chicken shit Senate, you may be surprised. In the story attached from the Texas Tribune, Special Prosecutor Kent Schaefer claimed this will be a fair trial where the judge is not corrupt and on the take. An obvious shot at Dan Patrick and his wussy Senate. As we know, Patrick was in charge of the so-called trial, but had received donations linked to Paxton. Oh, big surprise. That's what you call fair to Republicans in Texas, I guess. Some in the Senate wanted to give him a guilty verdict, but were afraid of being a target of Paxton and MAGA. Good Lord. Thank goodness none of these cowards were the founding fathers of the U.S. or Texas. We'd still be British or still be part of Mexico. In short, it took guts. Obviously not a Republican requirement nowadays. Shout out to Old Soul. I agree. It's great having her on. But we appreciate you as well, Mike. Till next time, everyday listener, Jace. Jace, thank you very much for the compliment. And I'll thank you for Old Soul, because I'm sure she would extend that. And I got to be honest with you, Jace, you've been on the show a number of times and you send a lot of emails. You have a great perspective. You have some great input, and you're valuable to the show as well. And much like I extend to Old Soul, I extend it to you and anybody else. There's a couple of people that haven't been on yet that expressed an interest, and I'm sure they're a little nervous about it. But I encourage anybody who wants to come on to come on. Now, some people are worried about, what if I say something dumb or something that's going to get me canceled? Here's the good thing about podcasts, mine anyway, it's not live. So once we do it and we record it, if you're rethinking something or have second thoughts about something, you just say, Mike, I think that was fucked up, and I can edit it out. So you're not really under the gun. We can just have our conversation. If there's something that you didn't feel comfortable with it, just let me know. And it's real easy to get on the show, as a lot of people know by now. It's just a matter of sending me an email at rationalboomer@gmail.com. Say, Mike, I'd like to be on the show. We kind of coordinate things, the time, and then the time comes, I send you a Zoom link and we talk. There's no format to it. We might talk a little bit before the show and see what's on your mind, but we don't have scripts or anything like that. We just talk like normal people would talk, except we're recording it. So the whole process is pretty easy, and I would encourage anybody who wants to do it to do it. Now, Ed last week, a lot of people ask about Ed. Normally, I'd record with Ed on a Friday afternoon or something. And I was going to do it last Friday, but he said, I got two things I got to do. I can't do it. So I'm hoping against hope that he will be available this Friday and you'll be able to hear Ed this weekend. All right, the next email. Mike, yesterday while on vacation in Hawaii, we visited Pearl Harbor and, of course, the USS Arizona Monument, where 1,177 people lost their lives on that day in December 7th, 1941. I didn't realize that ship became a resting place for over 900 of those sailors. I didn't know what to expect when I visited the monument that honored those that sacrificed their lives for liberties we enjoy today. What I didn't expect as I looked at the wall within the monument that displayed the 1,177 names of fallen soldiers is that I felt a sort of anger that I've never experienced. These soldiers gave their lives for the liberties we enjoy today, and all I could think of was the Republican Party. A good portion of our citizenship that is spitting on their graves as they seek to take the very liberties they died, take those liberties away from us. I would encourage you to visit, all of you to visit this monument if given the opportunity. Joshua. Well, thank you, Joshua. I have not been to Hawaii. I have not seen the memorial, but I would like to see it. I had a grandfather who was in World War II. He wasn't in the Navy and he wasn't in Hawaii, but it's interesting. I've told this before. My grandfather obviously was deeply impacted by World War II because every time I saw him, there was always some reference to World War II, and I was with my grandfather a lot. The weird thing about it is that everything he ever brought up about his experiences while in World War II were funny. He didn't talk about the gore. He didn't talk about all of that stuff. It was always funny. I think I've told this story before. He said they were going to Anzio, I believe it's in Italy. And as they're coming into Anzio, I don't know if they were in a plane or a boat or whatever they were doing. He tells the story this way. He says, the old man, meaning the commander, captain or whatever, said, now, when you get in there, do not drink the alcohol. The alcohol could be bad. Now, when my grandfather was young, he probably wasn't an alcoholic yet, but ultimately he would get to that point. He worked in a brewery. That was another interesting story. But anyway, I said, so what happened? He said, well, the next thing I remember, me and my buddy, Whitey, we woke up in a hospital and we were blind. What? He said, I said, so you went and drank the alcohol anyway? Oh, hell yeah. We drank the alcohol and it was bad and it was poison. And they ended up in the hospital and were blind for a few days. Fortunately, it wasn't permanent. But those are the kind of stories he always told me about World War II. He never talked about the negative stuff. Maybe it was because I was a young boy and he didn't think it was appropriate. But it was always fun to hear the historical things from my grandfather, from his perspective. That's one thing I remember about him most. He always told stories, and actually both my grandfathers told a lot of stories from the past, and that may be where I get my affinity for storytelling and listening to stories. Thank you very much, Joshua, for the email. Next one comes from Paul. Dear Mike, I know how your granddaughter keeps coming up in your stories. You're obviously a very proud grandpa. I am absolutely proud as punch, as they say. I tell people that little girl in my mind may be the greatest human being that ever lived. Just saying. Anyway, all I can say to that is mazel tov. I have two grown boys, but of my own, but am not yet a grandfather. I'm not rushing them, mind you. I just miss parenting and I'm looking forward to being a grandfather. Well, I tell you what, it's fucking awesome. It's, the best words I hear every time I see that little girl is, Grandpa, I miss you. I love you. You don't have to give me anything else after that. That's more than enough. Anyway, that's not the reason for this correspondence, he said. It's been brought to my attention that in the beginning of every trial, the defense can ask that it be thrown out for a myriad of reasons, which is true. They make motions to dismiss. The judge almost always declines, but has the power to accept the reasoning. Supposedly, it doesn't matter what the reason is. It's just up to the judge to decide. So Trump's defense lawyers can, at the beginning of the trial, make a motion that Judge Old Crone, Cannon, throw out the charges because the cow jumped over the moon. She has the power to accept the motion, throw out the charges, and Trump walks. On top of that, nobody can appeal the decision because trying to retry him would be double indemnity. I can't believe this is the case. I honestly believe the person that brought this to my attention is just afraid the sky is falling. So my question is there any truth to this? If so, how can double indemnity come into effect if there was never a trial? Like I said, I'm pretty sure that this is all BS. Just wanted to check with you. Be well, Paul. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the absolute answer to this, but I think you're absolutely right. If there is no trial, there can't be double indemnity. There isn't a decision passed in this trial. They will just dismiss it. And I just don't see Cannon dismissing it. She's got enough problems. And frankly, there probably already have been motions to dismiss that she probably turned down. That would be pretty flagrant if she did that. Here's the important thing. Don't worry so much about that case. Jack Smith is on top of it. I'm sure he's got a plan, and he's a lot smarter than Judge Cannon. But even if it just disappeared and it went away, which would be horrible, there's so much other stuff going on with Donald Trump that he's not getting away with this. He'll end up in prison one way or another. And there's only so many years you can give this guy. He could conceivably get a ton of years in the Florida case, in the Georgia case, and the Washington case, possibly more in New York, maybe some in Pennsylvania, maybe some in New Jersey. There's all kinds of places he can get charges. And like I've said, he only needs one or two charges to put him away for good. So if the court case in Florida takes too long, then I'm not as worried about it. I don't think that will happen. I think Jack is too smart. I think he's got that under control. I think it's coming soon that he's going to try to get her to recuse herself or get her kicked off the case. I don't know how he's going to do it. He's kind of setting her up. But the guy, whoever told you this, doesn't know what he's talking about either. I mean, I'm readily acknowledging that I'm not an expert on this, but common sense tells you something different. Double indemnity or whatever they call it wouldn't come into play here because there was no trial. He wasn't found guilty or not guilty. I mean, let's be honest. Say they went into the court case and the jury was hung. They went through the whole case. They tried it out. They went to the jury, and the jury says, we can't make a decision. Now, if what your friend is telling you, that would be double indemnity, and that's not even the term. There's another term for it. But the fact of the matter is, if there's a hung jury, they can re-prosecute. So, yeah, I think it's all bullshit. Don't worry about Donald Trump getting off. He's not getting off anything. All right. This next one comes from somebody I saw just the other day. I told you I went to that event where a friend of mine was in a band and was playing here in Minnesota. And one of the people that were there was a gentleman by the name of Tom, who says he's managing the band, which is a crazy thing to do. Tom, I don't know why you do that, having done that in the past. But he made a suggestion and I kind of went past it quickly. So he sent me an email today. Says, "Hi, Mike. Happy Halloween. I hope you're doing something fun with the grandkids tonight." Unfortunately, I didn't see the grandkids tonight. They're out with mom and they're doing a bunch of stuff. So I had to lay back a little bit. Didn't do much for Halloween. And I live in a condo with a security on it. So I don't even get kids coming here. So we just kind of laid low. It was like any other day. He goes on to say, "Thanks for the shout out about the band from last Saturday's visit. It was great to talk to you in person. I'm very glad your brother talked you into going." And he did. This Tom fella, he went to school with my brother. He was my brother's age. I didn't know him well in high school because I was older and clearly a lot fucking cooler. I'm kidding, kind of. Anyway, he goes on to say, "You read me correctly about the Rat Boom Town Hall idea. The humor part was added in case you thought it was a terrible idea. I think it might be something a little different, and hopefully your other listeners will agree." I'm not sure our friend Leanne, who was another woman at this dance, and another woman who not only went to school with us, she was a neighbor of mine too. I'm not sure if our friend Leanne would be comfortable participating, but who knows? Well, I know Leanne listens to the podcast. So, Leanne, of course you would participate. I expect you to participate. I would be heartbroken if you didn't participate. So, deal with that shit. Anyways, he says, "I envision 4 to 5 people together with you as a host. The live interaction between us talking about current events might be fun and interesting. Maybe there are more local boomers who would be up to participating. We could give them hats or something as a reward." Always promoting here. "I'll see who I can gather from my friends, and maybe our other local listeners could contact you. I'd enjoy helping you build upon this great program. Keep doing what you're doing. Tommy from the Hood." Now, Tom, I'm maybe not getting, I'm not getting this totally. Initially, when you said this, I thought, okay, he's talking about having 4 or 5 people on the podcast, which we can do. We've had 3 or 4 people on the podcast before. It gets a little confusing because of so many different voices. And if you're not watching the video, you don't know who necessarily is talking. But I'm willing to try it. What the hell? I'll do it. I'll do pretty much anything because it's my fucking show. Anyway, are you talking about it doing it at some venue, like a panel type thing and recording it? We could do that too. That's certainly possible. I'm up for anything, Tom. Let me know what you want to do, and we'll see if we can figure it out and get it done somehow. All right, moving on. Let's talk about Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Now, Mike Johnson kind of slipped in as Speaker of the House. Mike Johnson got every Republican vote, in spite of the fact that he is probably worse than Jim Jordan. The main difference between Jim Jordan and Mike Johnson is Jim Jordan's loud, obnoxious, volatile, a dipshit. Now, Mike Johnson is more quiet, more genteel, and people feel safer with him until they hear what the fuck he has to say. And then you realize he's as bad or worse than Jim Jordan. He is the epitome of evangelical MAGA fucks. He is a danger. Fortunately, he doesn't have much opportunity to accomplish much because the Republican Party is so divided. Anyway, we spent 3 weeks listening to the Republicans dick around trying to get a Speaker of the House. Frankly, it was very embarrassing that they couldn't put something together. They tried Steve Scalise. No dice. Jim Jordan, they voted on him 3 times and it got worse every time. So they needed somebody. The pressure was on. So they decided to pick somebody who was relatively new that hasn't made any enemies as yet, and mainly because nobody knows who he is, nobody cares who he is, and they thought they could get him elected. And sure enough, they did. I have to believe some of the Republicans didn't realize who he really was, because now, with his comments coming out about abortion and LGBTQ and all of that stuff, a bunch of these people are getting a little embarrassed and they're a little pissed off at him. I don't know if they held the vote today that he would get enough votes to be elected this time around. Nonetheless, he is the Speaker of the House until such time that somebody calls for a vote of no confidence and he gets kicked out. But they don't really want to do that because there's too much shit to do. And if you don't have a Speaker of the House, you don't get shit done. The three main things that they have to do is deal with supporting Israel in the Israeli Hamas fight, the war, supporting Ukraine in the Russia Ukraine war. And we got our own little budget thing we've got to deal with. They did a continuing resolution last time we got close to shutting down the government, and they put it out. They extended the deadline to mid-November. Well, as we sit here today, it's November 1, which puts us 2 weeks away from a possible government shutdown. Remember what I told you when they did the continuing resolution? The common sense would be start working on it right away and get this thing done before the deadline so it doesn't become so dramatic and so tumultuous. But did they do that? No. They spent most of the time holding hearings about impeaching Joe Biden, and now James Comer is thinking he might just let that go because he's looked foolish enough. And then they kick out Kevin McCarthy, so we've got no way to settle the budget. When they were having so much trouble finding a Speaker of the House, they just grabbed the first motherfucker that could get the votes, and we've got Mike Johnson. So now Mike Johnson and the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives has to come up with some kind of plan to get this budget passed. Now, MAGA is pretty draconian about the cuts they want. And if they had their way, they'd cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. But that's not going to happen. Now, Mike Johnson is going to have to negotiate with Joe Biden. Now, Mike Johnson is a relative neophyte in the House of Representatives, and he's not mentally all there. I'm sure that Joe Biden will tear him up when they talk. In order to get a budget passed through the Senate, they're not going to be able to do what MAGA wants to do. So if Mike Johnson is pressured enough to get this done, he's going to have to let go some of that MAGA bullshit. And then when he does that, assuming we get the budget done, is MAGA now going to be mad at him? They're already kind of mad at him because he's doing and saying things that they don't like. But here's the thing. Mike Johnson isn't demurring here at all. He's still talking loud and proud like a MAGA evangelical fucking idiot. Now, of course, Mike Johnson, because he's a religious fanatic, and that's what he is, he's a fanatic, wants to fund Israel. Well, that's cool. So do the Democrats. MAGA believes in supporting Israel, but they don't like spending money unless it's going to rich people. But what Mike Johnson doesn't want to do, he wants to give money to Israel, but not to Ukraine, which makes no sense. But it tells us something about the Republicans. They're all about Israel, and that's cool. They don't want to fund Ukraine because apparently they're sidling up to Vladimir Putin. I don't know what happened to this Republican Party. If you go back to the 80s, Russia was our arch enemy. And now, because Donald Trump wants to be Vladimir Putin's buddy, the Republicans love Russia now. Russia doesn't run a democracy. Vladimir Putin is essentially a vicious dictator, and apparently that's what the Republicans want. That's why they want Donald Trump back. But they're looking for a compromise to get this done. Joe Biden isn't going to agree anything that doesn't have Ukraine and Israel with it. They just aren't. Now, I know the Republicans would like them separate so they could get one thing and not get the other. Well, too fucking bad. That's not the way it's going to go. But the other thing that Mike Johnson is going to throw as some chum to the Republican Party is that they're going to want them to cut out and pull out the extra money going to the IRS, for the 87,000 new IRS agents. Now, they make it sound like they're building a troop of stormtroopers and they're going to attack everybody from the IRS to the general public. We know that it really only has to do with dealing with people making over $400,000, which is reasonable. Those folks at $400,000 and above either aren't paying their fair share or aren't paying any taxes at all. But basically, the Republicans and Mike Johnson are saying we don't want to subsidize Ukraine and save Ukraine, but we do want to pull back the IRS so they don't go after our wealthy people and corporations. Well, that's fucking ridiculous. I mean, this is all the Republicans do. They don't do anything for the people of this country, just give the rich a bunch of money. So then in turn, the rich people give them money. And that's all it is. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Mike Johnson, for as crazy as he is, he's going to be under the same pressure that Kevin McCarthy was in. He's going to have to bend, and he's going to have to get at least another continuing resolution that gets us through January or maybe even longer than that. Now, by pairing the aid with a targeted cut of IRS funding, Johnson may win support from Republicans, but likely ensured the package is dead upon arrival in the Senate if it passes the House. Now, Johnson, in an interview Sunday on Fox News, denied the bill, which would provide about a $14 billion in military aid to Israel, in addition to IRS cuts, was meant to score political points. My intention is not to use this for any partisan political gamesmanship. This is a very serious matter. You're not about partisanship. That's why you want to impeach Joe Biden. That's why you said there was election fraud. Forgive me. I'm not buying your bullshit. But the proposal amounts to Johnson throwing a bone to the same extreme faction of the House Republicans who threw out his predecessors in the Speaker's office, Kevin McCarthy. Now, after winning the Speaker's gavel by placating his far-right flank in January, McCarthy's first move was for the House to pass a symbolic slashing an IRS funding boost enacted last year by Democrats. Now, Johnson is following his lead. Doesn't matter that funding tax enforcement yields much more revenue down the line, or that a Democratic-controlled Senate would never approve their bill. These Republicans operate in an alternate reality where higher tax revenue is forbidden, and Democrats have no rightful role in governing. When Republicans passed their symbolic bill in January, slashing $71 billion from the IRS budget, the Congressional Budget Office reported that if it actually became law, the government would lose $185 billion in tax revenue over a decade for a net loss of about $114 billion. The same dynamic would apply to the Israel bill, according to one budget group. Maya McGinnis, president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, praised Republicans for seeking offsets for new spending, but said an IRS cut would be worse than no offset at all. Instead of costing $14 billion, the House bill will add upward toward $30 billion in debt. Instead of avoiding new borrowing, this plan doubles down on it. The extra IRS funds were part of a broader bill Democrats passed last year called the Inflation Reduction Act, and one of their proudest legislative achievements under President Joe Biden. Democrats have repeatedly touted the way extra funds for IRS enforcement, especially on complex cases involving business income, have forced wealthy tax cheats to pay their fair share. So they're all about collecting money, but they don't want to get tax cheats, the wealthy tax cheats. That shows you their mindset and what they're interested in. They're interested in supporting the wealthy and telling us to fuck off. All right, we will take a quick break and we will be right back. Well, this may not surprise you, but the New York judge overseeing the civil fraud case against Donald Trump is losing his patience with the former president's lawyers, which he accused of being slow on the uptake when it comes to the court's ability to fine. Now, Judge Engoron duked it out Tuesday morning with Trump's legal team when it again tried to dispute expert testimony, arguing the alleged billionaire can't be fined for fraudulently inflating the value of the Trump organization in financial documents. For reasons this court has explained ad nauseum, that view is simply incorrect, Judge Engoron said. The defendants are whistling past the graveyard. These lawyers are just saying what Donald Trump tells them to say. And it's all wrong. Donald Trump is not a lawyer. He's not even a fucking smart man. So when he tells these lawyers, you would think the lawyers would say, you know, Donnie, that's not going to work. But instead, they just do whatever he says. They look foolish when they do it, and they risk being sanctioned. You don't want to piss off the judge in a lawsuit like this when the judge is the one that's going to make the final decisions. There is no jury. Now, the civil trial decides not if Trump committed fraud. Remember, Engoron already ruled before it began that Trump had, but if and how Trump should be punished. That's what this trial is about. It's not to find out if Donald Trump is guilty. We already know he's guilty, and Judge Engoron said as much. It's how much he's going to have to pay. And it's going to be a shitload. Attorney General Letitia James would like to see the Trump organization fined $250 million and barred from conducting any business in New York State. And her team brought in an expert Tuesday to explain the legality of such a fine. Trump attorney Chris Kise tried to counter the expert's claim, arguing prosecutors could not prove lender banks would have acted differently if they had known Trump's statements were phony, but was cut off by a frustrated Judge Engoron. He said disgorgement is a clearly available remedy, he said. Several witnesses have testified that they would have acted differently had they known the statements of financial condition were fraudulent. So Donald Trump's lawyers are saying, how do we know they would act differently? Because they fucking told you in court under oath. That's how stupid these people are. I mean, Jesus Christ, I'm not a lawyer, and any one of us could have seen that. But again, it's just Donald Trump throwing shit against the wall and causing his lawyers to try to do the same stuff, in spite of the fact that it embarrasses the piss out of him. Now, Trump himself has tested the ability of the court to fine him by repeatedly violating a gag order, barring him from threatening court staff. He's been fined $5,000 and $10,000. And as I said, Engoron is getting a little frustrated. It's going to be interesting what they ultimately do when he does it again. And then, of course, on the federal side, Judge Chutkan has a gag order that they reinstated. And Jack Smith is getting tired of the bullshit. He asked her to pull back the stay that she had on it. She did. And he also said, listen, you have no other options. Put the motherfucker in jail. He laid that out. He put that on the table. And again, Judge Chutkan has to address that. I think what's going on with Judge Chutkan and Jack Smith is that they're trying to build this up slowly. And so when they actually have to do something, should that occur, they've got all their bases covered. I'm not an expert, but everything I've heard from experts sounds like that's what they're attempting to do. Here's an interesting story, long overdue story. The House Ethics Committee released a statement Tuesday saying it had gathered a mountain of evidence in its investigation of Representative George Santos, and it expected to announce its next steps on or before November 17th. Now, Punchbowl News shared the release from the committee, which details the extent of the evidence collected and people questioned. The ISC Investigative Subcommittee has contacted approximately 40 witnesses, reviewed more than 170,000 pages of documents, and authorized 37 subpoenas. The committee nonpartisan staff and the ISC members have put countless hours into this investigation, which has been a priority for the investigative team and involved a significant amount of the committee's resources. They look like they want to do this. They want to get it done. They want to kick his sorry ass out. And if I heard right, there's only been 4 or 5 other representatives ever kicked out of the House of Representatives in history. So Santos would be among an elite crowd. Now, in May, Santos was indicted by the Justice Department on 13 criminal charges. And then he was hit with another 23 in a superseding indictment earlier this month. Charges include wire fraud, falsifying records, and identity theft. Of course, he's pleaded not guilty to all of these things. Now, several New York Republicans launched a push to try to throw Santos out of his Long Island seat. Before the 2024 election, Santos has announced he will run for re-election. Good luck with that, motherfucker. Now, only a few weeks ago, Santos' former campaign treasurer pleaded guilty as part of a deal in court over working with Santos to commit wire fraud and identity theft, among other charges. I'm guessing that person is going to testify against him. Representative Nick Lalata said, that space is enough for an expulsion. You don't get to come here based on lying to all your voters and all your contributors. That is a minimum standard that should be enough. I think for 2/3 of the House to expel Representative Nick Lalata said Thursday when the New York Republicans' resolution to remove him was introduced. So what's going to happen is if they're going to expel him, they are going to have to take a vote, and it will have to be 2/3 of the entire House of Representatives, Democrat and Republican. So each side has about half. So they're going to need all of one party and at least half of another party to get this done. That's a big ask, given that there are MAGA fucks. And even the Speaker of the House, the new Speaker of the House, said, we should wait and see if he gets convicted. He gets due process. No, motherfucker, we have proof that he lied to get into his position. It's time you take action. Mike Johnson said as much that, well, we've got a tight majority here and we can't afford to lose that. So let's just ride this out. Well, apparently people in his caucus feel differently about it, and it'll be interesting to see how or if Mike Johnson tries to insert himself into this whole process. He'll be involved, of course. But does he have the power to shut down 2/3 of the House of Representatives? I think not. Now, Donald Trump's attorney, Alina Habba, you know who she is. She's an attractive young woman, and that's why she got the job working with Donald Trump. She's not a great lawyer. She's fucked up a lot of times, like, for example, when she should have checked the box for a jury trial in New York, and she forgot. So now he has to deal strictly with the judge. But Alina Habba is already thinking about her client's incarceration. This I found funny, according to a new interview on the far-right network Newsmax. Now, host Carl Higbie, great name, fuck him, brought up the gag orders in New York and in the federal election case, saying that they're actually helping Trump's campaign by raising millions of dollars. Have you really looked at Trump's campaign? He could use some help, but it isn't helping enough. How is this? Could they even possibly throw him in jail? What would that look like? Now, this is what Alina Habba, a noted weak ass lawyer who doesn't know what she's talking about. She said, he's protected by the Secret Service, period. Habba said, laughing. Yeah, you laugh, you dumb bitch. So I always tell people when they're panicked, listen, he's protected by the Secret Service, number one. Number two, he did nothing wrong. She cited his innocence as the second example on her list. But what she fails to understand is the Secret Service is an arm of law enforcement too. They have responsibilities and the Constitution they have to follow. They aren't going to circle around Donald Trump and protect him if he's going to jail. The Secret Service answers to the Department of Homeland Security. And who does the director of the Homeland Security answer to? Joe Biden. That's who he answers to. It's not like Donald Trump has any power with the Secret Service. People have also said, what if he decides to flee the country? Well, theoretically, the Secret Service should stop him. But if they don't, they better be going with him, because they're going to have problems right here. They may have some legal problems right here in the United States if they let Donald Trump bolt. So the idea that the Secret Service is going to protect him and keep him out of jail, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a guy sitting in my living room. But Alina, I know more about this than you because I have common fucking sense, and you're ridiculous. The other part of it where she said he did nothing wrong, well, I beg to argue that case. We've seen the evidence. He has done plenty wrong. So this woman clearly doesn't know what she's talking about. She goes on. So when people go to jail because they've done something wrong, do we have crooked situations in and out of court? Asked Habba rhetorically. Absolutely. Could they try? Probably. But it won't work because there is still a trial process. There are still facts, and unfortunately, they're not going to win on the facts. Secret Service will always protect President Trump. That's the truth. They have to, wherever he is. But it's not even something we think about, to be honest, because this is all political. It's really not. There's no criminal acts that he's done. There's no civil wrongs that he's done, unless making money for banks is a civil wrong. Higbee seemed to agree, but in a strange way. Orange man bad, he said, referring to Trump's bronzer that gives him an orange hue. This is how delusional these people are. They'll sit on Fox News or Newsmax or ONN or OAN or whatever it is, and they'll just flat out lie. This is clearly a lie. He did nothing wrong. There's no evidence. That's a clear lie. We know he did plenty wrong. And we know that there's a lot of evidence against him. She goes on, she says, I mean that it's Trump derangement syndrome at its best. I always like that comment. You have Trump derangement syndrome. I do, because I go along with common sense. If we were going to identify somebody who is deranged in the true sense of the meaning of the word, if we were going to identify somebody who's deranged, that would be Donald Trump. And that would be the people that follow Donald Trump. All you have to do is listen to them. If you listen to them, you know they're fucking deranged. So I think we should take this whole catchphrase that they have, the Trump derangement syndrome, and turn it around back on them, because they're the motherfuckers that are deranged because of Trump. Now, legal scholars debate whether Trump could go to prison if he's convicted of something. Former acting Solicitor General Neil Katyal said that it is possible, but other legal analysts have disagreed, saying that it's more likely he will end up under house arrest if convicted, or something that would equate to jail time. It's certainly something on Trump's mind, as he's brought it up at his recent rally in New Hampshire, comparing himself to the late South African president activist Nelson Mandela. For those people who say he can't end up in jail, I'll just say this. These are the same people that said he could never be indicted because he's a former president. Surprise, motherfuckers. He's been indicted 4 times, charged 91 times with felonies. You can take history and you can take what you know based on what you've experienced, but it has no bearing on today because what's happening with this president has never happened before. And if you're thinking, okay, well, he gets house arrest, I'd be fine with that. And you're probably thinking, well, he'll be down in Mar-a-Lago and living in luxury and there won't be punishment at all. Hold on a minute. We got another story coming up about this, but keep in mind, this New York civil case may end up taking all of his money and liquidating all of his assets. So where is he going to stay if he's got house locked down? He's going to probably get a little bungalow in Orlando or some fucking shit. Anyway, now you remember when Joe Biden proposed this student loan relief, everybody got $10,000 or $20,000 off their loans and all that stuff. And then, of course, the Supreme Court, in their infinite wisdom, said, yeah, that's not legal. So it didn't happen. But if you've noticed since that happened, there's always these little groups or subsets that are coming out and getting loan forgiveness. It's like Joe Biden's doing it a bit at a time, saying, you won't take the whole thing, so I'm just going to nickel and dime your shit. And that's what he's been doing. He also has another plan in the process that they're going to take to Congress. And what I would say is just ride this fucker out and wait till 2024. You're not going to get the Republicans to side with you, so why waste the time? Keep doing what you're doing, nickel and dime these guys when they're not looking, and keep forgiving loans. And then when the Democrats get the House and the Senate, then you can do all the things you want to do. So the Biden administration is proposing student loan relief for several more categories of borrowers in an effort to chip away at the nation's enormous student debt problem after the Supreme Court squashed the broad plan. Now, the Department of Education released the proposal Monday. It would provide debt relief for 4 groups of people. People who currently have outstanding federal loan balances that exceed what they originally borrowed. People who have loans that are more than 25 years past the start of their repayment date. People who took out loans to attend career training programs that created unreasonable debt loads or provided insufficient earnings for graduates, and people who are eligible for forgiveness but have not proactively applied for it. A 5th group of people who are experiencing financial hardship is also under consideration. The proposal would build on the other debt relief initiatives that have helped nearly 3.6 million borrowers wipe away a total of $127 billion so far, according to the Department of Education. Instead of resting on the HEROES Act like Biden's first plan, which tied debt relief to the pandemic, the new proposal leans on the Higher Education Act. A committee of negotiators will discuss the proposal at hearings scheduled November 6th and 7th and December 11th and 12th. Now, President Biden, Miguel Cardona, the education secretary, said President Biden and I are committed to helping borrowers who have been failed by our country's broken and unaffordable student loan system. While President Joe Biden's attempt to offer up to $20,000 of student debt relief to a broad swath of borrowers last year, lawsuits brought by conservative groups put an end to that plan. Instead, the administration has rolled out a patchwork of forgiveness plans, such as the SAVE plan, that aims to lower repayments by tying them or tying them to borrowers' income. So this is interesting. I give Joe Biden a lot of credit. The whole thing with the Supreme Court, that failed, and a lot of people were upset about it. But Joe Biden didn't forget about it and just move on to something else. He's got plenty of things he's dealing with, but he's chipping away at it at this point. And I appreciate the fact that he's making the effort. As I've said, they've got a new plan that they're working on. And while he's chipping away like he is, and I would just wait till 2024 when you have the power. You put it in the system right now, and you got all kinds of problems. You may still have to deal with the Supreme Court, but it'll be a little different situation when the House and the Senate are controlled by the Democrats. Because at that point, if the Supreme Court wants to fuck around, well, guess what? You go to them and say, listen, you want to fuck around? We're going to stack the Supreme Court. We're going to put 3 or 4 more people in there and fuck yourself. And watch them fold up and cooperate. Now, we were talking about the lawsuit and how it's going to impact Donald Trump. Conservative attorney George Conway. He's the one that was married to Kellyanne Conway, that piece of shit. Well, he's now the happiest man in the world because, of course, we know he divorced Kellyanne Conway, and Kellyanne may have some problems of her own. But George Conway weighed in on the implications of the civil fraud case against Trump. And by implications, he means the crumbling of the Trump's New York business empire. It's going to be gone. Trump and the Trump Organization are on trial in New York with Judge Engoron, as we've talked about. He's already issued a partial summary judgment stating that they committed fraud. Engoron ruled that Trump grossly inflated the value of his assets to obtain more favorable terms from lenders and insurers. Now, Attorney General Letitia James is seeking $250 million, as we know, as well as the revocation of his business license. The judge has granted the latter request, but his decision is on hold pending appeal. The state is expected to call 3 of Trump's adult children to the witness stand, starting today with Donnie Jr. That's going to be interesting. Now, Conway appeared on Monday's Inside with Jen Psaki on MSNBC, where the host asked about Trump's mental state. Jen Psaki said he followed him for a long time. How do you think this is all impacting him, the psychology? Conway said, you can see it. He's making mistakes. He's babbling incoherently, even more than usual. This is striking. He was the mogul. He was the mogul with The Apprentice, and he's been that in New York for 50 years. And now it's coming crashing down. Now, he went on to say if Trump were to lose his ability to conduct business in New York, it would prompt him to sell off his most prized assets. He's already been found to have committed fraud, that his books and records, that the statements of the financial conditions are false, and the judge has already ruled that there was no triable issue of fact on whether or not they were false. And as a result, the judge ordered that Trump and the Trump Organization, the ability to do business in the state of New York, should be invalidated. And that puts him out of business, basically, which means he's going to have to liquidate everything, including places like Mar-a-Lago. I know it's not in New York, but it's owned by a company in New York. They're owned by New York LLCs. But then the question of how much the proceeds of those sales, when he has to be put out of business, go to the state of New York. And that's what this is about. That's what you need to understand. Now, Psaki said, let's go back to what could potentially happen here. When you just said Mar-a-Lago could be liquidated, I think people might be like, wait, because isn't that rich? So he's already been convicted of fraud here, but the total size of this, it sounds like your belief is that it could have to sell a lot of his assets that doesn't have liquid funding to pay this. Now, Conway reiterated that Trump will not be allowed to operate a business in New York State if the judge's decision is upheld. The right to do business in New York is canceled, as is the certificates of incorporation of the various LLCs and companies that he himself owns, that are incorporated in New York. So he can't do business. He concluded this is a death blow to Trump's business. And that's exactly right. It is absolutely a death blow to Donald Trump. And as I've said, this may be the most devastating thing that has happened to Donald Trump. Donald Trump's entire his entire, how do I say this? Everything he is about money, property, and prestige. That's all he is. And without that, he's really got nothing. He needs money and power to play the bully. And when that's taken away, he's nothing more than a shell of what he once was. He won't have the power. And it's truly amazing. It's truly amazing to me that when somebody who's wealthy and then all of a sudden loses their money, guess what? All their best buddies lose interest in them, lose respect for them. And this is what's going to happen to Donald Trump. He will be destroyed financially. His companies will be done. It will be a death blow, as Conway said. And there isn't much he can do then. Now it's just like, at that point, when we're looking at criminal trials and shit, we're looking at the only thing left to do is to flush the fucking toilet, because he's just going to be laying there. Running for president will be the least of his problems at this point. So this is a big deal, this case, and it's not going well. And now his kids are going to be testifying starting today, and Donnie himself will have to testify. This could go on another month and a half, but when it comes down to it, when it's all said and done, Donnie Trump's out of business. And that's all Donnie Trump is his business. You take that away from him, he's got nothing. And in his mind, the worst thing has possibly happened, that he will be identified as a failure. He's a narcissist. So when it's been identified that he's a failure, he's just going to implode emotionally. You think he's fucked up now, just wait. Now, paranoia has been rippling through Trump land, with former president expecting anybody in his inner circle to show undivided fealty, even if that means they go to prison instead of him. He's more than willing to let people sacrifice themselves for his benefit. Well, it doesn't look like people are fucking doing that, because they're flipping at an astounding rate. Now, as Donald Trump digs in to defend against the barrage of indictments and civil lawsuits, he has made it abundantly clear in private that any aides or attorneys are to be loyal to the very end, sending several possible key witnesses to consider throwing Trump under the bus before he gets the chance to do it to them. The outlet's report involved chatting up 7 potential witnesses, ex-Trump confidants who are tied to the Fulton County, Georgia case, as well as the federal criminal probes. It includes legal advisors and other sources dialed into the matter. Now, it's interesting. It's very interesting that he expects these people to give him their loyalty when he's shown no loyalty, and they face jail themselves. Most of these people are much younger and have futures and families and such. Do they really want to sacrifice all of that for a tired failure of a former president? If they do, they deserve what they get. Now, through the interviews with sources, the damning conclusion is that the loyalty Trump expects is a one-way street, and that because he appears to be willing to hang them out to dry, they are conducting legal strategies that maintain self-preservation. Well, of course they do. I mean, he's always had the power to fire people or call them names in the press or on Twitter or whatever. Now people are looking at the options here. Do I have to take a verbal beating from Donald Trump, or do I spend 20 years in jail? It's not a fucking hard choice. Now, a former Trump administration official said, if I went to jail for Donald Trump, if I did that, what would that do for me and my family? I don't think he would even give us a lifetime Mar-a-Lago membership if I did that for him. Trump has been described as being annoyed while nudging confidants in the past week about why his former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, would be flipping for the prosecution in Fulton County to give them information at all related to his activities after the 2020 election. Why? Because you're an asshole and nobody likes you. The only reason people were loyal to you at all is because they were terrified of you. But now you're not so terrifying, and they're going to flip on you. Now, the publication is informed that it's the former president's belief that Meadows should be invoking executive privilege, shielding the president's action from public scrutiny and remain mum. Well, he could do that, but we know executive privilege isn't a thing when you're no longer the president. And we know if Meadows, after cutting a sweetheart deal of full immunity, if he does that, motherfucker's going to jail. Trump's former attorneys, Sidney Powell, Kenneth Chesebro, and Jenna Ellis, all took pleas when offered by Fulton County DA Fonnie Willis. They came after Georgia bail bondsman Scott Hall, who pleaded guilty. None of these people can try to save Donald Trump. The only way somebody like Mark Meadows in the federal case or in the Georgia case gets full immunity is because he's got something big, something that is going to take down Donald Trump. Those that have cooperated with authorities are measured by Trump as weaklings who have committed a betrayal, according to Rolling Stone. Publication also learned that Trump's staunchest allies and legal counselors drew up informal lists of the best possible fall guys to face the gauntlet in the federal probe in D.C., as well as the hoarding of classified documents in Mar-a-Lago. Now, among those names on the Patsy list, according to the outlet, were John Eastman, Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, Sidney Powell, Kenneth Chesebro, and that the tack taken by former president would be to offer that he was acting on the advice of counsel defense, which we know is not going to fucking work. He's already screwed himself on that one. Now, one lawyer who has known Chesebro for years apparently backed this up when Rolling Stone asked about whether Trump indeed planned to sell out his attorneys to save himself, saying, well, of course he would. That's what he's going to try to do, but it won't work. It just won't work. We've already established that he's admitted that he has gone against the advice of his lawyers, and that is a defense that will not work. So Donald Trump is fucked. There is no question about it. That's why I'm always amazed by the people that are so worried about him getting off. As I've said many times before, that's not possible. He's got right now 91 felony charges against him. No way he runs the table on that. And he only needs one or two to put him away forever. So I'm not worried about it. All we're waiting for is it to all happen, all fall in place and all happen. I feel comfortable in saying and predicting, but it's not even a prediction because I know based on what we have learned, Donald Trump is done. He's not going to rise from the ashes like a phoenix. It's not going to happen. He doesn't have the wherewithal to do it, and he is flat out guilty. We know that in the lawsuit, and when they take away everything that he owns, he is going to be a sitting duck pretty much. He's not really going to be able to do much. He'll try to grift, but that's starting to slow down. Nobody's going to his rallies. This is what happens with narcissists. They start out big, they are very successful, and then when people realize who the fuck they really are, then they start to fall away. And as they fall away, once again, it's Donald Trump all alone, probably dying all alone. like I've seen before with narcissists. All right, we are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.